We've all heard the saying, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, as if understanding each other were a cosmic impossibility. Many men spend their youth chasing an ideal, more handsome, more wealthy, more charming, yet still, they face rejection. Still, they feel lost in relationships they thought were secure. The problem isn't in appearance. It isn't in wealth. It lies in a lack of understanding of the deep psychological mechanisms within a woman, the emotional responses even she may struggle to explain. We don't need to manipulate, nor do we need to change them. What we need is understanding that keeps us from reacting impulsively, from being ruled by fleeting emotions. Understanding so we may live in accordance with Stoic principles. Master ourselves before seeking to influence others. 1. Women don't need you to solve everything. They need emotional safety. In today's world, where gender roles are becoming more fluid and equal, many men still carry the old belief that their duty in a relationship is to fix, resolve, and rescue. When a woman shares her worries, frustrations, or the fatigue of a long day, a man's instinct is to jump in with solutions, offering advice, analysis, even lectures, like a seasoned expert. Yet ironically, the more he does this, the more distance he creates, not connection. Psychologically, women are not usually seeking answers during emotionally driven conversations. What they seek, first and foremost, is a space of emotional safety, where they can express without judgment, correction, or unsolicited guidance. In other words, they want to feel understood, not explained. This is where many men go wrong. They believe their problem-solving drive is a sign of love and care, while to the woman, it may feel like a lack of empathy, even emotional detachment. Because each time you cut through emotion with logic, you're unconsciously interrupting her natural process of emotional regulation. Women often process emotions through verbal expression. It's how they release internal tension. But if, instead of listening, you respond like an engineer diagnosing a malfunctioning machine, you lose the chance to build deeper connection. When a woman says, "I'm tired," or "today was a mess," the answer she needs isn't, "You should rest early," or "maybe change your work approach." It's, "I hear you. That sounds overwhelming," or simply your steady, attentive presence. This is the difference between a man who reacts by impulse and one who responds with Stoic discipline. A Stoic does not get pulled into the whirlpool of emotion, yet he never denies the emotions of others. He observes, recognizes, and responds from a place of calm, not by imposing reason on someone in pain. The ability to create emotional safety is one of the highest forms of inner strength. It doesn't come from hollow words or proving you're right. It comes from unfearing presence, a state in which a woman feels she doesn't need to perform to be accepted. When you show up fully, without judgment, without the urge to fix, you are saying, "You can be yourself, and I'm still here." Emotional safety doesn't mean agreeing with everything. It means allowing someone to feel without fear of rejection. When a woman senses that you can stand firm amidst her emotional storms, she begins to lean on you, not out of weakness, but out of trust. Paradoxically, it's when you stop trying to control someone's emotions that you become their anchor. This applies not only in love, but in family, friendship, and work. A man who understands this no longer finds women too emotional, too unpredictable, or irrationally upset. Instead, he sees that every emotion has its reason, and the best response isn't to suppress it, but to stay present. In the Stoic spirit, not being swept up by another's emotions doesn't mean indifference. On the contrary, it means you are more present than ever. You understand that you don't need to say much. You don't need to fix anything. Just to be fully there, grounded, composed, and still. That alone can be healing. 2. What comes easily often holds little value. In behavioral psychology and cognitive economics, there's a phenomenon known as the scarcity effect. The rarer something is, the more highly we value it. This isn't just a consumer reflex. It's a principle deeply embedded in how the brain perceives worth. And in relationships, this same principle quietly governs behavior, even when we're unaware. Women, like anyone else, are drawn to what is challenging, unpredictable, and not easily possessed. When a man is always available, always ready, always the one to text first, his presence becomes a given, and what is taken for granted begins to lose value. It's not that women fail to appreciate sincerity, but that the human mind struggles to maintain reverence for what is constantly present. Like sunlight, vital, essential, yet rarely cherished each morning. Only in its absence do we grasp its true worth. A man who consistently signals, "I'm always here, anytime," however noble his intent, easily finds himself placed in the mental safe zone, a space where the woman no longer feels the need to protect or pursue the connection. Without pause, without space, without the sense of personal choice, the relationship begins to flatten. In contrast, a man with his own life, his own priorities, who isn't swept up by every message or mood, becomes unintentionally attractive, not because he plays games, but because he radiates the energy of independence, freedom, and direction. When you are not immediately accessible, you compel others to consider the true value of your presence. Attraction arises in the space between, in anticipation, in the room left for imagination and wonder. When a man doesn't reveal everything, doesn't instantly share every emotion, doesn't always respond on cue, the woman begins to invest more emotionally, to understand and connect. In that effort, the value of the relationship grows naturally. A healthy relationship isn't built on frequency of contact, but on the depth of presence. If you're always around without distinction, you fade into the background, not the center of attention. Conversely, intentional presence, timed and meaningful, leaves a lasting imprint. This is why scarcity, not in the physical, but in the spiritual sense, carries such weight. A man who understands this truth doesn't pretend to be scarce. He simply lives in rhythm with himself. He doesn't aim to be someone always needed, but someone remembered each time he's there. And it's that unpredictability, that absence of constant availability, that becomes the source of lasting allure. From a Stoic lens, this is self-mastery, not avoidance or manipulation, but a refusal to be absorbed by the need for constant affirmation. One who lives by this principle does not seek to prove his worth through endless presence, because he knows real value lies in what he brings, not how often he shows up. The more rare your presence, the more it matters. Not because you're playing mind games, but because you're living a life of substance. And when you live such a life, others naturally wish to be part of it, not because you need them, but because they feel drawn to your orbit. 3. Steady presence is an invisible magnetism. In every social interaction, humans communicate with far more than words. Even before anything is spoken, a person's presence already conveys a multitude of messages: posture, gaze, breathing rhythm, pace of movement, the delay before responding. These all subtly signal one's inner command and true confidence. To women, these nonverbal cues are not trivial. They are primal signals shaped by millennia of evolution for assessing a man's stability, safety, and potential value. A deep, slow, unhurried voice signals low anxiety and emotional regulation. Upright posture, open shoulders, and grounded steps reflect confidence that doesn't seek validation. When a man enters a space and draws attention without trying, it's his presence speaking on his behalf. True presence does not stem from showmanship or a desire to impress. It arises from inner equilibrium, where a man has no need to do something to be acknowledged. He doesn't rush words to fill silence, doesn't force a smile to please, doesn't react quickly to appear clever. Every action carries its own pace and space, unhurried by emotion, unbound by the need to prove worth. Women with a nervous system attuned to shifts in emotion and social energy are especially sensitive to these signals. A man who rushes, who anxiously seeks to impress, often evokes a sense of instability or lack of direction. By contrast, calmness, stillness, and deliberate communication suggest depth and the capacity to lead. Steadiness in presence is not limited to outer form. It's most clearly shown in emotional composure during uncertainty, in conflict, in the face of agitation, under criticism, or when expectations are unmet. A man's response becomes the clearest indicator of his inner grounding. If he maintains a calm voice, steady gaze, and even breath, he not only weathers the moment, but becomes a source of reassurance to those around him. Another hallmark of steady presence is consistency. A man conveys lasting stability not because he never changes, but because his conduct is not swayed by fleeting emotion. Praise doesn't inflate him. Criticism doesn't rattle him. He doesn't overcompensate to prove himself with every encounter. That consistency builds trust, becoming a pillar others lean on. And to women, it is one of the deepest sources of attraction. Ultimately, the magnetism of steady presence is invisible to the eye, yet deeply felt. It doesn't arise from communication skills, knowledge, or appearance, but from mastery of one's own energy. When a man enters a room with natural stillness, when he is fully present without effort or need for attention, even in silence, he speaks volumes. That is why, in many cases, a woman is drawn in before she even knows why. She's not reacting to specific actions, but to the way the man simply exists. And in today's turbulent world, where everything is rushed and shallow, steady presence becomes a rare and compelling distinction. 4. The willingness to walk away is the strongest signal of self-worth. In relationships, one of the clearest signs of a man's inner worth is his willingness to walk away when treated unfairly, not in anger, not as punishment, nor in protest, but in silence, with resolve and calm. The ability to walk away without resentment, without needing to prove a point, without lengthy explanations, is the surest sign that he does not measure his value by others' approval. When a man stays in a relationship where he is disrespected or accepts emotional harm out of fear of loss, he sends the opposite message, that he's willing to trade his principles and dignity for a place in someone else's life. This exchange doesn't just erode his attractiveness, it subconsciously signals to the woman that she's in control, not through connection, but through his tolerance. By contrast, a man who stands firm in his values, regardless of fleeting emotions or relational pressure, radiates a wholly different energy. It is the energy of self-respect, not arrogance, but loyalty to one's own code. He doesn't leave to threaten, nor does he stay to beg. His decision stems from internal clarity, not external behavior. This produces a paradoxical reaction in a woman's mind when she realizes the man can walk away, not out of anger, but because he refuses to remain in a space that no longer reflects his values. The sense of control reverses. He is no longer the one who needs her, but the one who chooses her. And anything that is chosen, not clung to, carries far more allure. Walking away doesn't mean impatience or irresponsibility. It isn't a sign of quitting too soon. It is a final act, one made after observation, reflection, and honest self-examination. When a man sees that he has given fully, communicated sincerely, been patient and understanding, but still receives no reciprocal respect, then walking away is not an overreaction. It is an act of self-preservation. This ability also reflects a deeper principle of self-reliance. One cannot expect others to value him if he himself does not enforce boundaries. In any relationship, boundaries are what safeguard personal worth from violation, and no boundary speaks louder than the act of leaving. When words no longer carry weight, this action also reveals the power of letting go, a core virtue in Stoic practice. Letting go is not defeat. It is refusing to remain tied to something that no longer mirrors one's true self. When a man's choices are guided not by emotion, but by principle and clarity, he's not just protecting himself. He's teaching others how to treat him. In the end, when a woman witnesses a man walk away for the right reasons, she not only sees his boundary, she begins to respect him on a deeper level. Because value is never asserted through words, it is revealed through action. And so many times, the strongest action is not staying to fight, but walking away calmly when your presence is no longer honored. 5. A man with purpose is unshaken by recognition. In today's world, where every action can be rated through likes, comments, or instant attention on social media, the need for recognition has become a powerful psychological pull. Yet it is this attachment to approval that causes many men to lose direction in both life and relationships. A man without purpose becomes dependent on what others think of him. In contrast, a man with a clear mission does not allow himself to be swayed by fleeting distractions. A man with purpose always knows what he is doing and why he is doing it. He does not act to impress, nor does he make decisions based on others' praise or criticism. He does not seek external validation, because the clarity within is enough to guide his behavior. His focus on purpose shields him from being shaken by momentary emotions, superficial compliments, or indifference from his surroundings. To women, the presence of a man with direction generates a difficult-to-explain magnetism. When a man is not governed by emotional swings and does not overreact to acceptance or rejection, he emits signals of stability and direction. This psychological independence creates a sense of safety and respect, because women naturally trust a man who knows where he is going and doesn't need others to chart his course. A man on a mission does not place a woman at the center of his life. He may love, he may connect deeply, but never at the cost of leaving his path. A relationship can only endure when built on the foundation of two complete individuals. A man without purpose often becomes the pleaser, constantly adjusting himself to be accepted. But the man with purpose does not cling. His worth is not rooted in acceptance, but in the journey he is building. One clear trait of a man with purpose is his ability to say no with clarity. He is unafraid to reject what doesn't align with his path, even if it displeases others. His decisions are shaped by principles, not by a need to maintain temporary emotional harmony. This makes him consistent and dependable. 2 essential pillars in building lasting trust. Purpose also protects a man from emotional imbalance in relationships. He doesn't use love to prove his worth, nor does he rely on connection to feel complete. Each day he wakes with a clear reason to act, and that reason does not shift with applause or resistance. This inner stability becomes a solid ground that anyone in his presence can feel. In a society that encourages instant reaction and constant validation, the man who detaches from that tool and lives by long-term purpose becomes distinct. He has nothing to play. His presence, his persistence, and the way he handles adversity are his clearest proofs of character. And in this very absence of needing recognition, he becomes the most visible, not because he seeks attention, but because few can stand firm without applause. A man with purpose doesn't wait for permission to move forward. He began his journey long ago, and it is that very path that makes others turn and look. 6. Vulnerability is not weakness if you master it. In popular culture, especially within traditional notions of masculinity, vulnerability is often equated with weakness. Men are taught to be strong, resilient, and to suppress emotion. Yet this belief is increasingly limiting, especially in a world where meaningful relationships demand emotional depth. The issue is not whether to show vulnerability, but how it is shown, whether you master it or let it master you. Vulnerability at its core is a natural response to loss, rejection, or physical and emotional harm. It is a signal that one still feels, still holds value in people and in life. But when vulnerability manifests as constant complaining, emotional dependency, or expecting others to soothe your pain, it ceases to connect. It becomes an emotional burden. By contrast, when a man shares his vulnerability from a place of strength, having processed, overcome, or actively faced it, he is no longer ruled by emotion, but stands above it. Revealing pain with composure signals emotional maturity. It does not ask for help. It invites empathy. It does not seek pity. It builds trust. For women, emotional connection is central to any relationship. They often feel closer when a man opens up sincerely. But not every emotional sharing builds connection. When a man repeatedly displays insecurity, seeks constant reassurance, or leans on others to stabilize himself, it creates imbalance. When emotion becomes a weight, it reduces attraction and undermines the safety of the relationship. A well-held vulnerability, expressed at the right time, to the right person, in the right measure, has the opposite effect. It shows that a man does not run from his feelings, yet is not ruled by them. He can say, "I failed. I was hurt. It pained me, but I learned," without losing composure or confidence. In that moment, vulnerability becomes proof of resilience, not evidence of collapse. Mastery of vulnerability also shows in choosing when and where to express it. A man who controls his emotions doesn't let pain erupt impulsively. He considers whether the other person is trustworthy, whether they can listen, and chooses language that invites understanding without pulling others into emotional chaos. The ability to master vulnerability is not only attractive in relationships, it is a critical life skill in any setting. At work, you will face failure or conflict. In family, there will be misunderstandings or loss. The ability to acknowledge pain without losing direction, without reacting destructively, marks a man with inner strength. Attractiveness doesn't come from pretending to be untouchable. It comes from being able to be hurt and still standing, to feel pain, but not collapse, to be fragile for a moment, but still hold long-term clarity. It is this paradox between vulnerability and control that creates depth of character and a quiet magnetism in the way a man shows up in the lives of others. 7. The tests are real, and you will be tested. In relationships, especially between men and women, there are always moments when a woman's behavior seems inconsistent or appears to test the man. It might be a sharp comment without clear reason, a sudden silence after everything seemed fine, or an unexpected reaction to something trivial. These are often referred to as tests, and they are very real. These tests aren't always deliberate. In many cases, they arise unconsciously, an instinctive way for a woman to assess whether the man she's connecting with is emotionally stable and dependable under pressure. It's her subconscious gauging whether he can hold his ground and regulate his emotions when things become unpredictable. Such tests usually don't appear early on, when everything feels new and exciting. They arise when a woman begins to seriously evaluate the deeper value of the man in her life. At that point, how he responds to tension, uncertainty, or emotional discomfort becomes a key indicator of long-term compatibility. If a man reacts impulsively, defensively, or with anger, it sends a clear message. He lacks the emotional foundation to be a stable presence. On the other hand, if he remains calm, acknowledges her feelings without losing himself, his presence becomes naturally more attractive. At that moment, his response is no longer about the situation. It's a declaration of emotional command and inner strength. These tests are not games. They are not manipulative acts. They are part of a natural selection process in which a woman, often unconsciously, looks for someone strong enough, not just to enjoy the highs, but to remain present through the lows. It's not about making things difficult. It's about knowing whether someone can be relied upon when it matters most. A common expression of these tests is sudden distance, reduced communication, or behavioral inconsistency. These are not necessarily signs of withdrawal. Sometimes, they're simply a way of observing how the man responds. If he panics, demands clarity, or chases attention with emotional instability, he fails the first test, control over self. Passing these tests isn't about tactics. It's about understanding and composure. A man who grasps this doesn't get pulled into unnecessary mind games. He doesn't try to prove anything, doesn't overreact, and doesn't demand immediate explanations. Instead, he stands firm in his values, acts with consistency, and demonstrates emotional steadiness, even when the external environment feels uncertain. When a man navigates these moments with calm and clarity, he sends a powerful message. He is not easily manipulated, does not depend on constant validation, and can endure ambiguity without losing himself. That becomes the groundwork for lasting attraction, not only emotionally, but psychologically and philosophically. When a woman sees that a man doesn't react out of fear, but holds presence with calm and self-command, a deep sense of safety is established. And in most cases, that is the very thing that makes her choose to stay. 8. Fearlessness of rejection means freedom from manipulation. Rejection is an inevitable part of any relationship or social interaction. Whether in dating, work, or daily life, everyone encounters rejection at some point, and how one responds to it is a defining measure of character and personal worth. Those who fear rejection act from a place of loss. Those who don't fear it act from inner clarity, and that distinction changes how they are perceived. The fear of rejection is a natural response, rooted in the basic human need for acceptance. Yet when this need becomes the main driver of a behavior, it often leads to blurred boundaries, self-abandonment, and emotional dependence on others' approval. This is how many people end up being controlled, not through direct coercion, but through their craving for validation. By contrast, a man unafraid of rejection carries a completely different energy. He doesn't act to be chosen, but to live in accordance with his truth and values. He understands that compatibility is not guaranteed, and not everyone will appreciate his qualities. That doesn't shake him. When faced with rejection, he doesn't lash out, beg, or rush to change himself. Instead, he smiles, nods, and continues forward. To women, a man's calm response to rejection reflects psychological maturity and emotional steadiness. When he doesn't spiral into resentment or insecurity, he demonstrates that his value isn't tied to anyone's approval. This kind of inner independence creates both safety and attraction, because he doesn't need to be told he's good enough in order to believe it. Typical behaviors of someone who fears rejection include replying too quickly to avoid missing out, agreeing to everything to avoid being turned down, and overthinking when there is no reply. These habits diminish one's value in others' eyes and make a person predictable, less intriguing, and emotionally dependent. Meanwhile, a man who doesn't fear rejection acts with selectiveness, remains unrushed, and sets boundaries, even if it means losing a potential connection. Rejection is not a definitive judgment of one's worth. It is merely a reflection of misalignment at a specific moment. A man who understands this doesn't see rejection as a loss, but as a redirection, an opportunity to seek what fits better. He doesn't let fear dictate his choices because he knows true value doesn't come from being selected, but from staying grounded in who he is, regardless of circumstance. In the long run, the man who doesn't fear rejection is the most free. He doesn't need to be validated. He is not burdened by needing to be loved, accepted, or kept. When others realize he's willing to walk away if the connection lacks alignment, they begin to see him differently, not as a pursuer, but as someone to be seriously considered. And it is precisely this freedom from the fear of rejection that enables a man to remain self-possessed, to avoid reactive behavior, and to act with unwavering consistency. He is not controlled, not because he seeks to control others, but because he refuses to let the fear of exclusion control him. 9. Being unpredictable is a form of discipline. In human behavior, attraction does not stem solely from appearance or speech, but also from how predictable your actions and reactions are to others. When a man becomes too predictable, responding instantly, oversharing emotions, and constantly seeking connection, he gradually becomes familiar, even dull, in the eyes of others. In contrast, unpredictability not only sparks natural curiosity, but also reflects a deeper form of inner discipline. Unpredictability is not about playing games or intentionally causing confusion. It is the result of controlling the rhythm of interaction, choosing responses with intention, and not allowing fleeting emotions to govern behavior. An unpredictable man is not necessarily secretive or distant. Instead, he knows when to be present and when to remain silent, when to share, and when to keep certain things unspoken. Behavioral psychology has shown that the human brain responds more strongly to stimuli that are not easily anticipated. When one cannot predict another's next move or reaction, the limbic system, the emotional center, becomes alert, focused, and more likely to retain the memory. This explains why those who are moderately hard to read tend to leave a deeper impression and sustain interest longer in relationships. The ability to be unpredictable is closely tied to self-mastery. A man may delay replying to a message, not out of indifference, but because he refuses to act under the sway of fleeting emotion. He may listen attentively, but not rush to advise, observe quietly, without needing to speak. He does not react impulsively when challenged, nor does he feel compelled to reveal his every thought or daily schedule. These behaviors stem from the discipline to preserve one's energy, attention, and control. Unpredictability also helps reset dynamics in relationships. When a man is always reactive, always waiting, always responding the moment he is called, he often finds himself in the position of the follower. In contrast, when he maintains just enough detachment and responds on his own terms, he creates a relational structure in which he is not pulled by another's tempo. This doesn't weaken connection. It makes every interaction more deliberate and meaningful. Another reason unpredictability is attractive lies in sustaining strategic surprise. When your behavior defies routine patterns, the other person cannot fully anticipate your next move. This forces them to pay closer attention, think more deeply, and invest more emotionally. This psychological chain reaction, linked to anticipation, keeps the bond engaging and enduring. However, true unpredictability cannot be sustained without inner consistency. A man who shifts with emotion, silent today because he's hurt, warm tomorrow because he's lonely, is not unpredictable, but unstable. Disciplined unpredictability requires a firm foundation, knowing what to share and what to withhold, how to respond without losing one's value, and doing so without coldness or distance. In today's social environment, where people overshare, overreact, and constantly seek validation, the ability to interact with restraint has become rare. And that is why unpredictability, when guided by inner discipline, becomes a timeless source of attraction. Not because you're hiding anything, but because you don't give everything away too quickly. Not because you're cold, but because you're selective. And in that selectiveness, your value rises. 10. He who masters desire masters the game. Desire is one of the most primal forces driving human behavior. In relationships between men and women, physical attraction often emerges early and intensely. Yet it is a man's response to that desire that reveals whether he is in control of the situation or merely being led by instinct. The one who masters desire is not without longing, but has the power to channel it toward higher values and purpose. Unlike emotions such as sadness, anger, or joy, desire exerts an urgent pull and can easily provoke action without regard for long-term consequence. When a man is consumed by desire, he becomes willing to accept unfair terms, compromise his principles, and abandon personal standards for momentary satisfaction. This creates dependency and imbalance, where a woman instinctively senses who holds control and who merely chases. By contrast, a man who governs his desire projects an invisible but unmistakable strength. He does not rush the pursuit, is not swayed merely by appearances, and does not let lust cloud his clarity. This restraint sends a clear message. He is not governed by biology, but guided by conscious choice. The ability to turn down immediate gratification for a greater purpose is among the highest forms of personal discipline. Mastery over desire does not mean total avoidance of intimacy. It means preserving core values, even in the face of temptation. He does not trade his principles for physical closeness, nor does he wield sexuality as a tool for manipulation or approval. Every action is measured in the context of mutual respect, never driven solely by base impulse. To women, a man who does not rush into physical intimacy inspires safety and respect. This calmness reflects maturity and the ability to stay grounded when most would lose direction. When she sees that he is not swayed by beauty or seductive gestures, she realizes her worth is seen not just in appearance, but in character, individuality, and emotional depth, qualities many long to have truly recognized. Furthermore, a man who controls his desires is better equipped to make sound decisions in complex situations. Unshackled from impulsive craving, he can judge others by their true nature, detect early red flags, and avoid unhealthy entanglements that stem from emotional haste. This clarity protects him from long-term costs like emotional dependence, identity loss, or damage to reputation and purpose. Desire in itself is not to be eliminated, but to be ruled. And the setting of firm boundaries in tempting situations is the clearest expression of a principled life. When desire is deliberately channeled, it no longer derails one's path, but becomes fuel for greater goals, career, honor, and holistic growth. Thus, in any relationship, the man who controls his desire also sets the tempo of the game. He is governed by nothing And that makes him the center of gravity, not because he chases, but because he is the one pursued, not because he longs to possess others, but because he has already claimed himself. From personal experience, I've come to realize one thing. Most relationship failures don't stem from a lack of effort, but from acting out of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of losing attention, fear of not being validated. But when I began living through the lens of Stoicism, I learned to shift from reaction to deliberate action. Instead of rushing to text just to maintain contact, I learned to wait in silence and observe myself. Instead of striving to please, I began asking, does this reflect my true values? There were moments I chose silence even when I wanted to speak, not from indifference, but because I wanted to be certain I wasn't being steered by emotion. The hardest lesson was learning to walk away. Yet it was in that very act that I felt the deepest sense of inner freedom. When you know you need nothing to feel whole, you no longer fear losing anything. From that moment on, every action, whether communication, choice, or response, became clearer, stronger, because it was rooted in something steady within. Stoicism doesn't make you cold. It makes you unshakable, and that is the greatest gift you can give yourself. If you found value in what you've just heard, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss upcoming content. This isn't just philosophy. It's a way of life, and this path begins with a single choice: to stop chasing emotion and start living by principle. Self-mastery is not a destination. It's how we move, day by day, moment by moment, with complete awareness. See you in the next video.